First Light by Andrew Harwood. First published in 2026 by the Thompson Newman Files Limited. All rights reserved. The sea between Cyprus and Gibraltar was calm enough to make men complacent. That was what Drew Newman disliked about it. Calm seas lied. They made young Marines believe the world had rules. They made officers talk about timings and logistics as though chaos cared for either. They made fresh lads straight out of Limpstone stand on the deck of HMS Albion with their sleeves rolled up, faces turned into the Mediterranean sun, grinning as if soldiering was a thing that happened in training areas and ended with tea. Drew stood apart from them, one shoulder against the grey bulkhead, mug in hand, watching. They were good lads, too young mostly, too clean behind the eyes, the sort who still carried the commando course inside them like a badge and a wound. They had earned the green beret, no question, but earning it was one thing. Learning what it cost was another. A corporal nearby laughed too loudly at something one of the lads had said. Drew glanced over, said nothing, and took a sip of tea. It was strong enough to strip paint. Perfect. They had been in Cyprus for 2 weeks, exercising hard in heat that made men stupid. Amphibious drills, night landings, close-quarter work, live fire. The sort of training that looked impressive in reports and bruised everyone in practice. Now they were heading west, back towards Gibraltar. Routine, recovery, maintenance, lessons learned. Then the ship changed. It was subtle at first, a shift in pace, a clipped exchange on the bridge, a rating moving faster than necessary. The tannoy crackled once and died. Drew saw the captain appear at the far end of the deck with 2 officers beside him. One of them looked at Drew, and Drew knew. He lowered the mug from his mouth. "Colour Sergeant Newman," one officer barked. Drew stepped away from the bulkhead. "Sir, the captain needs you. Now." The operations room aboard Albion smelled of electronics and men pretending not to panic. A screen at the far wall showed a grainy still image frozen from a video. An image so common in the war on terror. 3 men on their knees, hands bound, faces bloodied. Behind each of them stood a masked fighter with a rifle and a blade. Drew looked at the image for 3 seconds. Then he stopped looking at the men and started looking at the room. Maps, satellite imagery, radio frequencies, a coastal outline, northern Algeria, somewhere east of Algiers. A compound inland from a shallow fishing beach. The captain spoke first. 4-man SAS team inserted 48 hours ago. Covert tasking. Details compartmentalized. They were compromised last night. 3 captured. 1 evaded. Alive? Drew asked. The 4th? The 3. The captain's jaw tightened. At the time of the video. Yes. A Navy intelligence officer stepped forward, too pale for the heat. Video was released 90 minutes ago. They claim execution at sunrise local time. Drew looked at the clock on the wall. "Sunrise is in less than 10 hours, he said. "Yes. What assets are inbound?" A silence followed. That told him more than the answer would have. The captain said, "None close enough." Drew looked back to the map. "Air? Not without permissions we don't have, and time we don't possess. Special Forces support? Too far out. Local partners?" The intelligence officer almost laughed, but caught himself. Not viable. Drew stared at the coastline. "So it's us." The captain did not dress it up. "Albion is the only British asset close enough with boats, marines and command capability to attempt recovery before execution." "Attempt," Drew said. "Yes." There it was. The word officers used when they already knew the odds. Drew folded his arms. "How many tangos?" "Estimates vary, 20 to 40 in the compound. possibly more in surrounding structures. Weapons, small arms, usual AK-47s. PKMs, RPGs possible, technicals also possible. Hostages located. The intelligence officer pointed to a marked rectangle on the satellite image. Likely held in this building here, but the execution is expected in the central yard. Propaganda value. Drew leaned closer. The compound sat in a dry bowl of land behind a line of low scrub. A dirt road ran in from the east. The sea lay to the northwest, beyond a narrow beach and a rise of broken rock. There were outbuildings, corrugated roofs, hard shadows. Not impossible. Bad, certainly. But not impossible. Fourth man? Drew asked. Call sign Havoc. Captain Mike Harrington. He's evaded into the coastal scrub. He made brief comms contact 30 minutes ago. Low battery. Injured but mobile. Says the others are alive. Says he can guide an assault force in. Drew's eyes remained on the map. Can he fight? He says yes. Everyone says yes. The captain watched him carefully. Can you do it? Drew did not answer immediately. He thought of the lads on deck, laughing in the sun. He thought of their mothers and fathers. He thought of the 3 men on the screen, kneeling in the dirt, waiting for sunrise. Then he thought of what would happen if they did nothing. He straightened. I'll need my troop. LCVP landing craft. Suppressed weapons if armory can issue them. Night optics, breaching kit, extra medical. A sniper rifle with match-grade ammunition, communications tied back to ship, and tea. The captain blinked. Tea? Drew looked at him. Tea before tactics. I'm not taking fresh Marines into an execution rescue uncaffeinated, sir. For the first time, the tension in the room cracked, only slightly. But enough. The captain nodded. You'll have what we can give you. Drew turned to leave. Colour sergeant. He stopped. The captain's voice was lower now. These men are SAS. Drew glanced back. I know. They'll expect competence. Drew's expression did not change. Then we'd better give them some. The young Marine stopped laughing when Drew walked back onto the deck. They knew before he said a word. Soldiers always did. Training had a rhythm. Real operations had a gravity. It moved through men before orders did. Drew stood in front of them, tea still in one hand, the Mediterranean sun sinking behind him. Listen in. They gathered fast. No jokes now, no swagger, just eyes. Young eyes. Trying not to look young. We have 3 British soldiers held by hostile forces ashore. They are due to be executed at sunrise. We are the only people close enough to stop it. No one spoke. Drew let the silence sit. You are not being asked to perform a training exercise. You are not being asked to look alley. You are not being asked to be heroes. He looked from face to face. You are being asked to do your job. A few of them swallowed. Good, Drew thought. Fear was useful. Fear kept men alive. It was arrogance that killed. We go in by boat. We link up with the 4th man from their team near the beach. He guides us to the target. We isolate the compound, locate the hostages, kill anyone who tries to kill us, recover the prisoners, and return to ship. A Marine near the back asked, Rules of engagement, Colour? Drew looked at him. Anyone holding a weapon in that compound after we go loud is a threat. Anyone threatening a hostage dies. Anyone surrendering gets secured. We are Royal Marines, not murderers. The lad nodded. Drew continued. This will be dark, fast and confusing. That means you do the simple things well. Watch your arcs. Listen to your section commanders. Don't bunch. Don't run unless told. Don't shoot unless you know what you're shooting at. He paused. And no one freelances. His eyes hardened. I mean that. No one decides they're in a film. No one charges off to win the war on his own. You stay disciplined, you stay alive, and we bring those men home." There was a murmur of acknowledgement. Drew pointed towards the armory. "Kit up." The next hour was a blur of preparation. Magazines were filled, weapons checked, radios tested, medical packs opened and repacked. The lads moved with a nervous efficiency that improved every time Drew walked past them. He corrected small things: a loose strap, a badly seated magazine, a helmet cover that would shine under moonlight. He did not shout. Shouting wasted air. One Marine, barely 20, fumbled with his sling twice. Drew stopped beside him. "What's your name?" "Baines, colour." Hands shaking Baines. The lad froze. "A bit." "Good. Colour?" "Means you're not an idiot." Baines let out something close to a laugh. Drew adjusted the sling himself. "You keep close to Corporal Ellis. You do exactly what he says. You'll be fine." "Yes, colour." Drew looked at him for another moment. Then he said quietly, "Fear isn't the problem, panic is. Don't let fear drive." Baines nodded. Drew moved on. By the time the landing craft was ready, night had fully taken the sea. The ship ran dark, no unnecessary lights, no unnecessary noise. The young Marines sat packed together in the craft, faces blackened, weapons across their knees. The humour had gone out of them now. What remained was something better. Focus. Drew sat forward, rifle case beside him, headset on, eyes fixed ahead. The coastline appeared as a darker line against the dark. Over the radio, the ship's operations room fed updates in clipped bursts, satellite feed intermittent, compound activity continuing, hostages believed alive, enemy unaware of incoming force. Believed. Drew had always disliked that word. The landing craft pushed through the final stretch of water, engines low, waves slapping against the hull. When the bow touched sand, Drew was first out. Cold water hit his thighs. He moved through it without hesitation, boots finding the beach. The Marines followed, disciplined and quiet, fanning out as they had rehearsed 100 times in places that had not mattered. This place mattered. They crossed the beach and reached the scrub line. A shape emerged from the darkness. Half the troop raised weapons. "Hold," Drew whispered. The man stepped forward with both hands visible. He was tall, broad-shouldered, filthy, and moving like every part of him hurt. One eye was swollen, nearly shut. Blood had dried along his jaw. His shirt was torn beneath a borrowed local jacket. But the way he carried himself was unmistakable. S.A.S. "Newman," the man whispered. Drew responded. "Harrington?" "Mike." Drew. Overhearing the exchange, Baines nudged Corporal Ellis and whispered, "Corporal, isn't he a captain? Shouldn't colour salute or call him sir?" Corporal Ellis smiled. "He is S.E.A.S. Colour knows that it is a rule in Special Forces that you never salute in combat or call a Rupert." "Sir." Mike Harrington looked past Drew at the Marines. "This is the rescue force?" Drew followed his gaze. Fresh faces, green berets, young men pretending not to be terrified. "Yes," Drew said. Mike's mouth twitched despite the blood. "Christ." Drew stepped closer. "Problem?" Mike looked at him then. Really looked at him. He saw the calm, the stillness, the utter lack of performance. "No," Mike said. "Just checking." "Good. Where are your lads?" Mike crouched and drew quickly in the dirt with 2 fingers. "Main yard here. They're being held in the western building. 2 guards outside, more inside. At sunrise they'll bring them out here." He tapped the center. "They'll film from the south side. Executioners behind them. Commander usually stands near the truck." "How many?" 30, maybe 35. Some foreign fighters, some local. Discipline's poor. They like noise." "Patrols?" 2-man roving near the road. 1 on the north wall. Lazy. "Heavy weapons?" "PKM on a roof. RPGs in the east shed. At least 1 technical, but it's been temperamental." Drew studied the dirt map. "How close can you get us?" "To that ridge." Mike pointed inland. 800, maybe 1,000 yards from the yard. Good line of sight if you've got glass." "I do." Mike looked at the rifle case. "You any good?" One of Drew's young Marines glanced up, offended on his behalf. Drew only said, "I make tea better than I shoot." Mike stared at him. Then, despite the situation, he laughed under his breath. "God help us." "He usually does, but I prefer a contingency." Drew unpacked the Accuracy International, closed the rifle case and slung it. They moved inland in a slow, careful file. The country beyond the beach was dry and broken, all scrub, stone and shallow gullies. The moon gave them just enough to be dangerous. Mike led despite his injuries, stopping twice to steady himself against rock. Drew noticed, said nothing. The Marines followed well. Better than expected. Fear had sharpened them. At the ridge, Drew crawled the last few meters and eased himself into position behind a slab of stone. Below, the compound glowed faintly in generator light. He lifted his optics. There they were. 3 men. Bound. Beaten. Alive. For now. Drew felt the world narrow. Everything else dropped away. The sea, the ship, the young Marines behind him, even Mike breathing hard beside the rock. Only distance remained. Wind. Light. Angle. Drop. Movement. Time. Mike crawled up beside him and looked through his own small optic. "That's them," he whispered. Drew did not answer. The 3 SAS men were inside the western building, visible only when a guard opened the door. One had a head wound. One seemed barely conscious. The third was sitting upright, shoulders squared even with his hands tied. "They'll bring them out at first light," Mike said. "I know. They'll do it fast." "I know." Mike turned his head slightly. "You say that a lot." Drew adjusted the scope. "People keep telling me things I know." There was a pause. Then Mike whispered, "Fair enough." Drew shifted back and called his section commanders in close. The plan formed in murmurs. 2 sections consisting of 3 fire teams each would move to the north and east, cutting off escape and suppressing the roof weapon. 1 section would breach the western building if the hostages remained inside. If they were moved to the yard, Drew would take the executioners first. On his shot, the Marines would assault. Simple. Terrifying. But simple. Drew looked each section commander in the eye. "Once I fire, everyone moves. No hesitation. Shock is ours for about 5 seconds. After that, it belongs to whoever uses it best." They nodded. Mike listened without interrupting. When they dispersed, he said, "You've done this before. Not exactly this. But close enough." Drew looked through the scope again. "There's no close enough." The eastern horizon began to pale. In the compound, men started moving. A generator coughed. Someone shouted. A door opened. Drew's breathing slowed. The hostages were dragged out one by one. The first stumbled and was kicked to his knees. The second fell hard and did not rise until 2 fighters hauled him upright. The third spat blood into the dirt and laughed at something one of them said. Mike went still beside Drew. "That's Jock," he whispered. "Stupid bastard." Drew watched. The 3 prisoners were arranged in the center of the yard, facing the camera position. Behind them, 3 executioners took their places. Masked, armed, blades visible. The first stood behind the left-hand prisoner, the second behind the middle, the third behind the right. Drew adjusted the scope. The first 2 were almost perfectly aligned from his angle. Almost. He shifted his body 1 inch. Better. The first executioner turned his head to shout at someone. Drew waited. The man turned back. Drew's finger rested on the trigger. The compound commander stepped into view, speaking theatrically for the camera. Dawn touched the roof lines. The 3 prisoners knelt in the dust, bound and bloodied, seconds away from becoming a message. Mike whispered something. A prayer, perhaps. Drew did not hear it. The world had become glass. His breathing stopped between heartbeats. He fired. The suppressed rifle cracked once, flat and final. At 1,000 yards, the first executioner's neck opened in a red mist. The round passed through soft tissue, bone and air, continued on its path, and struck the second executioner high in the skull. Both men dropped, as if the ground had been taken from beneath them. For half a second, no one understood what had happened. With minimal movement and without distraction from the target, Drew caressed the bolt and chambered another round. The third executioner turned. Drew fired again. The man's head snapped back, and he collapsed behind the third prisoner. 3 executioners lay dead. 2 shots. Then hell arrived. The Royal Marines assaulted like men who had been waiting their whole lives for this moment. The north section opened first, cutting down the roof gunner before he reached the PKM. The east section hit the shed and the road approach. Controlled bursts punching into shadows where armed men scrambled for rifles. The main assault group surged through the breach in the outer wall, flashbangs cracking white in the yard. Confusion became panic. Panic became collapse. Drew fired twice more, dropping a fighter sprinting towards the prisoners and another reaching for an RPG near the technical. Mike was already moving. "Idiot," Drew muttered. Then he followed. The slope down from the ridge was treacherous, loose stone sliding underfoot. But Drew moved with the rifle held close and his body low. Mike was ahead of him, favouring one leg, pistol drawn. In the yard, the young Marines were no longer young. They were loud, controlled, and violent in precisely the way they had been trained to be. Corporal Ellis drove his fire team left. Baines covered an angle with white-knuckled discipline, firing only when a fighter appeared with a weapon. Another Marine tackled a surrendering insurgent to the ground and cuffed him hard enough to make the man think better of resistance. Drew entered through a gap in the wall and saw one of the prisoners being dragged clear. Alive. The second was conscious, swearing magnificently. The third was not moving. Drew crossed the yard at speed, dropping to one knee beside him. "Medic!" A Marine slid in beside him. "He's breathing," the medic said. "Keep him that way." Mike reached the other prisoners and cut the first man's bindings with a knife. "About bloody time," the prisoner muttered. Mike grinned through blood. Traffic was murder. The man looked at Drew. "Who's he?" "The reason you still have a head," Mike said. Drew ignored them and looked around. "Status." Reports came in broken but clear. North secure, east secure, western building clear, 2 enemy fleeing south, no Marine casualties. Drew almost allowed himself to feel relief. Almost. Then a burst of automatic fire hammered from the far side of the compound. A Marine went down behind cover, not hit, just driven low. Drew turned and saw the technical lurch into motion near the eastern gate, engine coughing, a fighter swinging a mounted weapon towards the yard. Drew raised his rifle. Wrong weapon, wrong angle. Before he could fire, Baines stepped from cover with an NLAW on his shoulder, face pale, eyes enormous. For one horrible second, Drew thought the lad would freeze. "Baines!" he shouted. The young Marine looked at him. Drew pointed. "T before tactics." Baines blinked. Then, absurdly, he smiled. He fired. The rocket struck the technical just forward of the mounted gun. The vehicle erupted in flame, lifting sideways and slamming back onto its wheels in a shower of sparks and torn metal. The yard fell silent except for ringing ears, burning fuel, and men breathing hard. Drew stared at Baines as he lowered the launcher with shaking hands. Was that tactical enough colour? Drew looked at the burning vehicle. "It'll do." Extraction was faster than the assault. It had to be. The sun was rising now, and daylight was the enemy of every improvised miracle. The released prisoners were carried, dragged, and half-walked back towards the beach. Mike refused assistance until he nearly fell over a rock, and Drew grabbed the back of his jacket. "Stop being SAS," Drew said. Mike grimaced. "Can't. Contractual. I'll shoot you myself. Not from 1,000 yards, I hope." Drew shoved him forward. "Move." Behind them, the compound burned in places, not enough to hide what had happened, enough to make anyone approaching think carefully. The Marines withdrew in bounds, disciplined and sharp. They carried their captured intelligence, and one wounded insurgent who had surrendered and looked deeply surprised to still be alive. At the beach, the landing craft pushed in through pale surf. Only when the last Marine was aboard did Drew step off the sand. He stood for one moment with the water around his boots and looked back at the coastline. The sun had cleared the horizon. Sunrise. He wondered whether the three men had noticed. Then he climbed aboard. No Royal Marine had been killed. No Royal Marine had even been seriously wounded. All the SAS team were alive. That was the only arithmetic that mattered. Back aboard HMS Albion, the ship's medical bay became controlled chaos. The rescued men were stripped, treated, stitched, hydrated, and sedated under the brisk tyranny of naval medics. Mike resisted treatment until one nurse threatened to have Drew sit on him. Drew said, "I will." Mike surrendered and lay down. Several hours later, after debriefs had begun and messages had gone back to London wrapped in classification and understatement, Drew found himself alone on a quiet stretch of deck with a fresh mug of tea. He had not slept. He did not expect to. The sea was still calm. It seemed offensive now. Footsteps approached. Drew did not turn. Mike came to stand beside him, one eye swollen, ribs strapped, face cleaned badly enough to reveal new bruises beneath the old ones. He held a mug in one hand. "You always drink this much tea?" Mike asked. "Yes." "Operational requirement?" "Spiritual one," Mike nodded solemnly. "Understood." For a while they watched the water. Then Mike said, "I owe you." Drew shook his head. "No, you saved my team. The Marines saved your team. You took the shots. They assaulted the compound." Mike looked at him. "You, always this difficult to thank?" "Yes." A faint smile tugged at Mike's mouth. He took a drink from his mug and immediately winced. "Christ, what is this? Tea. That's not tea. That's a chemical weapon. Royal Marines blend. Explains a lot." Drew almost smiled. Mike leaned his forearms on the rail, looking older suddenly. "I thought they were dead." Drew said nothing. "I was in the scrub listening to them beat Jock over the radio until the battery died. Couldn't get close enough alone. Couldn't call anyone who could arrive in time. I've been in some bad places, Newman, but that was..." He stopped. Drew let him. Some silences deserved respect. Finally, Mike said, "Then you lot came out of the sea." Drew sipped his tea. "We do that." Mike looked sideways at him. "We're the trooper children. They're Marines. They were children 6 hours ago." Drew glanced back towards the ship, where Baines was sitting on a crate with a blanket around his shoulders, staring at nothing while another Marine shoved a brew into his hands. "No," Drew said quietly. "Not anymore." Mike followed his gaze. "No," he agreed. "Not anymore." Another silence settled. This one easier. Mike tapped his mug against the rail. "You should try selection." Drew frowned. "What?" "Selection?" "I heard you." "Then why the face?" "Because that's a stupid thing to say to a Royal Marine on a ship full of Royal Marines." Mike shrugged and winced as his ribs objected. "SAS. SBS. Don't care which. You should be somewhere smaller, darker, and more unpleasant. That your recruitment pitch? I've had blood loss." "It shows." Mike turned fully towards him. "I'm serious." Drew looked out to sea. I've got a troop. You had a troop, and you led them into something most experienced men would have found a way to avoid. Wasn't avoidable. Exactly. Drew said nothing. Mike continued, quieter now. You see clearly under pressure. You don't posture. You don't panic. And that shot... Don't. Mike stopped. Drew's voice had changed just enough. Don't make it a story. Mike studied him. It already is. No, Drew said. It was 3 men about to be murdered and a firing angle that happened to be kind. That's one way of putting it. It's the only way that matters. Mike looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. All right. Drew expected that to be the end of it. It wasn't. Mike said, You still should try selection. Drew exhaled through his nose. You're persistent. I'm alive. Gives me confidence. You're alive because a group of very young Marines did exactly what they were trained to do, and because you fired 2 shots that changed the outcome before the enemy knew the game had started. Drew did not answer. Mike pushed away from the rail. Think about it. I won't. You will. I won't. You're thinking about it now. Drew turned his head slowly. Mike smiled, bruised and bloody and infuriating. There he is, Mike said. That's the look. What look? The look of a man who hates being predictable. Drew stared at him. Mike raised both hands. All right, I'm going before you throw me overboard. Tempting? Mike took a few steps, then stopped. Newman? Drew glanced back. Thank you. This time Drew did not refuse it. He gave a small nod. Mike walked away. Drew remained at the rail until his tea went cold. Below decks, reports would be written. In London, senior men would use words like successful, timely, and courageous. The official record would be precise and bloodless. It would mention an amphibious intervention, a hostage recovery, enemy combatants neutralised, and British personnel extracted. It would not mention Baines's shaking hands. It would not mention Mike Harrington whispering into the dirt before sunrise. It would not mention that Drew had seen the first 2 executioners align and felt no triumph, only calculation. And it certainly would not mention the phrase that began spreading through the lower decks before Gibraltar. 3 kills, 2 shots. Drew heard it first outside the galley. He stopped. 2 Marines froze mid-conversation. Drew looked at them. Something interesting? No, colour. Didn't sound like nothing. The younger one swallowed. Just saying it was good shooting, colour. Drew held his gaze. Good shooting is hitting what you aim at on the range. The Marine said nothing. Drew stepped closer. What happened today was men nearly dying because other men wanted cameras pointed at murder. Don't make poetry out of it. Both Marines nodded. Yes, colour. Drew walked on. Behind him, after a safe number of seconds, one whispered, Still 3 kills, 2 shots though. Drew closed his eyes. Tea, he muttered. I need more tea. By the time HMS Albion reached Gibraltar, the rescued SAS men were being flown onward. The official story had already begun to disappear, and the young Marines had learned the strange aftertaste of survival. Mike Harrington found Drew one last time before leaving. He looked better. Not good, but better. You know, Mike said, I checked. Drew did not look up from the kit he was inspecting. That sounds ominous. SBS selection cadre would be very interested. Drew continued checking a rifle sling. You're still talking? Yes. Despite medical advice? I ignore most advice. That tracks. Mike grinned. You'd fit right in. Drew set the rifle down and looked at him. Why do you care? Mike's grin faded. For once he answered plainly. Because men like you are rare, and because one day I might be kneeling in the dirt again with some lunatic behind me, and I'd rather know you were somewhere nearby being miserable and competent. Drew stared at him. That may be the worst compliment I've ever received. It's heartfelt. That makes it worse. Mike held out his hand. Not a handshake exactly, a soldier's grip, wrist to wrist. Drew looked at it. Then he clasped Mike's forearm. For a second, neither man said anything. It was not friendship yet. Not quite. It was recognition. Mike released him. "Selection, Newman." Drew shook his head. "Goodbye, Harrington." Mike walked towards the waiting transport, then called back. "You're thinking about it." Drew ignored him. "You are." Drew turned away. But that night, in Gibraltar, long after the paperwork, after the congratulations he did not want and the questions he did not answer, Drew stood alone with a cup of tea and looked out across the dark water. Somewhere beyond it were smaller teams, darker places, more unpleasant work. He thought of 3 men kneeling in the dust. He thought of young Marines becoming old in a single morning. He thought of Mike Harrington's bruised grin and irritating certainty. Then he took a sip of tea and sighed. "Bloody Ruperts," he said softly. And for the first time, Drew Newman allowed himself to consider selection. Not because he wanted glory, not because he wanted stories, but because somewhere, at some future sunrise, someone would be kneeling in the dirt. And Drew had discovered something about himself that morning. He could not stand the thought of being too far away to stop it. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this story, please like, subscribe, and ring the notification bell. I'm building a thriller universe called the Thompson Newman Files, and there are many more stories still to come. Until next time, remember, tea before tactics.